Hello, my name is Reverend Dr. May Elise Cannon. Today is Saturday, December 2nd, and it's day 57 since the Hamas attacks on South Israel on October 7th. Greetings. I'm in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I'm in the pastor's office at the Redeemer Lutheran Church. I'm grateful to have been hosted here for an event today. We've been meeting with a couple of our church partners where several dozen people gathered to talk, learn, pray, grieve, commit to collective actions we can take to working towards peace. If you know of churches that you think might be interested in working with us, please have them send us an email at info@cmep.org. Today, I wanted to give an update on some statistics and some facts. As you know, and I shared yesterday, on December 1st, hostilities resumed. This was following a humanitarian pause that had started on November 24th, so it lasted 7 days. And heavy Israeli bombardments started back up across Gaza. There was ground fighting. There was indiscriminate rocket fire from Palestinian armed groups toward Israel. As of December 1st, in the evening Middle East time, 178 Palestinians had been killed. 586 Palestinians had been injured, according to the Ministry of Health in Gaza. No Israeli fatalities had been reported in that context. All of my statistics today come from OSHA, the Office of the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. Their emergency relief coordinator, Martin Griffiths, stated that the pause, quote, offered us a glimpse of what can happen when guns fall silent. We need to maintain and build on the progress in aid delivery. We need civilians and the life-sustaining infrastructure they rely on to be protected. We need the remaining hostages to be released immediately and unconditionally. We need a humanitarian ceasefire. We need the fighting to stop. And our position at CMEP is that we need a comprehensive bilateral ceasefire for violence from Hamas and violence from Israel to end, for there to be a negotiated settlement. That does not mean that Hamas remains control in Gaza, but that the alternative means to violence would be used to pursue the next steps. On December 1st, the Israeli military published an online detailed map where the Gaza Strip is divided into hundreds of small areas. Reportedly, this map is intended to facilitate orders to evacuate specific areas ahead of targeting. This publication does not specify where people should evacuate to. So one of the great problems is that Israel is posting things on the military website and the people in Gaza don't have electricity, or there are pamphlets being dropped where people are being told to evacuate, but they don't know where to go. And so it's unclear how those residing in Gaza should access this map without electricity and telecommunications. On December 1st, these leaflets were dropped ordering residents east of Khan Yunis and in the south to move into shelters in the Rafah area. But as of yet, no major displacements from those regions have been reported. Under international humanitarian law, parties to conflict must take all feasible precautions to avoid and minimize civilian harm. You've heard me share yesterday, we've been so frustrated with the US government because they have said that they will be doing so. And yet you heard the statistics that within 24 hours, nearly 200 civilians were killed. And someone I was talking to said, that's such a small percentage of nearly 2 million people. And our response would be, that's still not good enough. That's not good enough. In the West Bank, since October 7th, there have been more than 3,000 Palestinians arrested. More than 160 of those have just been in the past 6 days. 6 Palestinian men, according to the UN Human Rights Office, have died while in Israeli custody. The total death tolls right now on October between the 7th and 19th of November, the tolls were at 12,700. Those were reported by the Gaza Ministry of Health. They stopped reporting because of the collapse of hospitals. And then we had the issues where Gaza has been in a blackout. So the media office took over reporting. And so the reports from the Gaza media office are saying more than 15,000 fatalities by December 1st, including 6,150 children and more than 4,000 women. The fatality toll since October 7th and the resumption of hostility includes at least 198 medics, according to the Ministry of Health, 112 UN staff, the most UN workers in the United Nations history, 73 journalists and media workers, 15 civil defense staff, according to the Palestinian Civil Defense. 75 Israeli soldiers have been killed since the ground operations began. Displacement has been a huge issue. The reports are now saying 1.8 million people, or 80% of the population of people in Gaza, have been displaced. And then the UNRWA numbers of refugees who've been displaced include 99 UNRWA shelters in the south and 156 total UNRWA facilities across Gaza. There's overcrowding, there's poor sanitary conditions. There is significant concern about communicable diseases and conditions such as diarrhea, acute respiratory infections, skin infections, and hygiene-related conditions like lice. There are initial reports of disease outbreaks, including hepatitis. We've been talking about these concerns. Concerns are also raised significantly about vulnerable people groups who are struggling with difficult shelter conditions, people with disabilities, pregnant women. At the start of October 7th, there were 50,000 women in Gaza who were pregnant. Women who've recently given birth or who are breastfeeding, people who have injuries or surgeries or who have compromised immune systems. Since October 11th, the Gaza Strip has had an electricity blackout. After the Israeli authorities cut off the electricity supply and fuel reserves, the sole power plant in Gaza has been depleted. So now availability of fuel and electricity is produced by generators and solar panels. But I know last week it was raining and dark. And so at least for a few days last week, the solar panels were only at 10% of capacity. Healthcare is a huge issue, including the effects of attacks. There is a reported hepatitis A outbreak in one of the shelters. There have been some vaccinations that have been given in UNRWA shelters. 4 hospitals in the north are partially operating and admitting patients, but have very limited services. None of the hospitals in the north have any types of surgery capacity. During the humanitarian pause, the UN was able to deliver life-saving medicines and surgical supplies, including fuel, to the 2 hospitals in Gaza City, Ali, which is the Anglican hospital, and Al-Sahaba, which were desperately needed but are still functioning at limited capacity. Water, this is really important. According to OSHA, there was almost no improvement to access of residents in the north to water for drinking and domestic purposes, because the main water production facilities are still shut off and there is lack of fuel and also damage. Water is primarily available from small private or UNRWA wells, and there are serious concerns about waterborne diseases. In the south, there are 8 water wells that provide potable and domestic water to IDP shelters, and then there's water truck operations. In the past few weeks, solid waste collection from camps and emergency shelters and transfers to landfills are continuing with an attempt to try to reduce the health and environmental risks. Food security is a huge issue. I won't go through the specific details, but it's particularly severe in the north, with malnutrition being a reality. In terms of the hostages, it was reported yesterday that according to Israeli media, 6 Israelis who are hostages or assumed to be hostages were declared killed. During the humanitarian pause, 86 Israelis and 24 foreign nationals were released, and an estimated 137 are still remaining, it's believed to be in Gaza, which includes Israelis and nationals, foreign nationals. Before the pause, 4 civilian hostages had been released by Hamas, and 1 Israeli soldier had been rescued. 3 bodies of hostages had reportedly been retrieved by Israeli forces. I could go on in terms of more statistics. I really wanted to just give you a large picture. There have been continued conversations about the possibility of more attempts at a pause to continue the hostage negotiations. I have not heard that progress has been made in that regard as of yet. The realities in Gaza are devastating, and there are many, many people who are suffering. We know the situation in the West Bank is incredibly difficult, and our plea and our cry is that all people, but that we together could work towards peace by calling for a ceasefire. Someone in the meeting this morning had connections in the region, and they just said, can you tell me, how do we find hope in the midst of this? And I don't know the answer, but I can say that hope is moving forward when it seems like there's no hope. That hope is about believing that God is present and that God is good, even when the world is so broken and when it seems like evil is triumphing. And hope is taking actions and taking steps, small steps even, when we don't know if the steps that we're taking are making any difference. I often say, and you've heard me say it, despair is the luxury of the privileged, and we will not give in to despair. And so I do know this, that by staying in the struggle, by entering into the pain, by asking God to break our hearts and to allow us to be transformed, that hatred within us would become love, that brokenness within us would become healed, that communities that are broken that would be healed, that God would intervene, that light would shine in the midst of darkness. I do know that the work that you are doing, that our presence, that our struggle together in community, I do know that that brings hope to others. I've heard it directly, and so might that be an encouragement to you. Let us not give up hope. Let us continue to call for a ceasefire, and let us work together toward peace.